30,000 vehicles cross the Francis Scott Key Bridge on a daily basis. It's virtually, it's one of the most important elements for the economy in the Northeast.
Well, I don't like to predict the future, but I'd be willing to bet that John Carney has a little bit more of an elaborate explanation on the bridge and the port and what it means. Joining me now, Breitbart News' finance and economics editor, John Carney. Okay, John, we'll set that explanation aside for the time being, and let's deal with, first of all, the port itself. It's down. It's going to be down for a while, especially now that the government's involved. We know that. What does that mean for us, for Baltimore, for the country? Does it matter?
It does matter. Remember a couple of years ago when we had all of those ports on the West Coast backed up, when we had ships waiting out at sea? We're having a miniature version right now outside of Baltimore. Obviously, nothing can get in. Those ships will be redirected to other East Coast ships, but there are other East Coast ports, but there's not a lot of extra capacity at any of those ports. So that will mean that we will get a backup into those ports as well. Over time, people will start to shift away from the East Coast ports to the West Coast ports. Remember, the Red Sea is still tied up because of the Houthi attacks. So things that might come through the Red Sea are now going around the Horn of Africa. Now they get jammed up in the East Coast ports. So a lot of stuff will come across the Pacific. That will jam up the West Coast ports. So what we will see, unless this gets cleared up very quickly, which I do not believe it will, is port traffic jams, congestion, cascading across all of the American ports, East and West Coast. And that will cause backups. We're going to have supply shortages, scarcities, and frankly, probably some additional inflation pressures because of what happened in Baltimore.
Okay, let's nail down on that, because that's actually exactly where I was going with this. Let's deal with the scarcities first. Scarcities for what? Should I be buying toilet paper?
Yeah, well, so one of the lessons from the pandemic, right, is who knows, right? We just run out of random stuff all of a sudden. Maybe it's toilet paper. A lot of cars come through that port, so there will be a problem, probably shortages of cars. What that does is not just push up the price of imported cars, but also pushes up the price of used cars, because when you can't get a new car, people turn to the used car market. So we're going to see some problems with that. It is, but just a lot of Amazon is a major shipping hub right there in that Baltimore port. So a lot of goods people order from Amazon actually come through Baltimore. And so what we're going to see is delays in that. And so I'm not sure we can predict exactly what we won't be able to get our hands on, but I can predict that it will become more difficult for probably a bunch of stuff that nobody expects. You'll go into a store and say, wait, why is that shelf empty? Again, flashbacks to 2020.
Okay, so why inflationary? A port going down doesn't print money. How does that come?
Well, remember, one, the port going down is going to print money because we just had Biden tell us that the federal government is going to have to pay for all of this. So they are going to be printing money. It is going to ramp up demand. But even without that, when you have a supply shock, remember, what inflation is it's when demand outstrips supply. When you have a supply shock, that can create inflation even without printing more money. You just have the same amount of money chasing fewer goods. So we're adding to that the demand shock, which is it will take a lot of labor and a lot of materials just to clear the port. Then you start to think about what we need to do to rebuild the bridge. This thing cost $141 million in 1977. I'm going to just say that it's going to cost 10 times that much, at least, to rebuild in 2024.
Yeah, I was doing the inflationary math in my head on what that meant for today. Okay, John, I'm going to ask a stupid question, and you might not even be the one to ask it, but I'm going to ask it because I was thinking about it as we were looking at that video on there and the bridge is in the water and whatnot. Okay, the bridge went down. It's sad. It's bad. I realized that. Praying for all the lost families. But the bridge went down. The port didn't go down. The bridge went down. Why does the port have to shut down for months or a year? Because there's no bridge. And unless I'm mistaken, the cargo ships weren't taking the bridge.
Right. No, that's a very good question. Actually, it goes back to the decision back in the 1970s to build a bridge across the Baltimore harbor. That may not have been the best idea. Originally, they wanted to build a tunnel across the Baltimore harbor so that the ships could just go over it. Instead, we built a bridge. The channel runs under the bridge. You have to take a very narrow pathway to successfully get through that channel. It brings you quite close to the bridge itself. This ship was not that far off of where it needed to be when it hit the bridge. And so there has always been a risk. Now, these are very carefully monitored, very carefully controlled. So it hasn't happened. This bridge has been, standing there operating since 1977. But this bridge blocks the port. Ships cannot get to where they need to go to unload. There are a few ports, loading bays in front of the bridge, so some stuff will be able to get in and out of the port. But basically, they're going to have to close it down. They're going to have to re-dredge the channel. They're going to have to pull all of that steel and cement out of the channel. I've heard some people say that they think it could be reopened in a matter of days. That doesn't strike me as realistic. I think we're talking weeks, months, maybe longer, because it is a major operation to get in there, pull all of that stuff out, make sure that the channel is deep enough. Remember, these giant ships require a pretty deep channel to get in and out of there. You can't, it's not just like you and I going kayaking in an afternoon and we can do it in a brook. These things have to be at least 50 feet deep to just get through. So you not only have to get everything out of there, you have to make sure the channel is still deep enough after all of this stuff has fallen into it.
John, I heard that margins in shipping are actually small. People think they're huge because you have all these goods and services and you're moving this vast quantity of wealth essentially across oceans, and surely there just must be billions and trillions at stake here. But that's not the case. Why are margins so small in shipping?
Yeah, actually, usually shipping loses money. One of the reasons there aren't public companies that exist, like why can't you buy stock in most shipping companies? Well, the answer is because they usually lose money. They make money every 10 years when there is some big problem that actually makes some of the ships, something like a catastrophe or the pandemic, for instance, was a profitable period because there weren't enough ships to get all the goods across. And so they get profitable every 10 years and try to make up for all of the money they lost over the previous 10 years. It is not a very stable business. It is one that is usually unprofitable. It is profitable almost only when there are big catastrophes that happen. And one of the reasons for that is it is just very expensive to fuel and maintain and then control one of these giant ships. It is not a inexpensive endeavor. And frankly, it's never really been inexpensive to do transocean shipping. We actually invented modern corporations, the idea of limited liability, because shipping was such a risky and expensive venture that nobody would even do it if they were actually going to be liable for all the damages that could be done from a sunken ship. So we invented, the modern corporation basically to allow people to take the risks that are involved with transocean shipping.